When we came into the government, we found an asylum and immigration system in chaos. The previous government had lost control of the system and, as a result, opened many hundreds of asylum hotels across the country, while returns were a third lower than in 2010. They deliberately cut asylum decision-making by 70%, leaving a steeply rising backlog behind. The system has to be controlled and managed, based on fair and properly enforced rules, not chaos and exploitation driven by criminal smuggler gangs. We removed 35,000 people with no right to be here, including a 28% increase in returns of failed asylum seekers. In August, I signed the new treaty with France, allowing us for the first time to directly return those who arrive on small boats. We're bringing forward new immigration rules this week to temporarily suspend new applications under the existing dedicated refugee family reunion route until the new framework is introduced. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I will update the House on actions that we are taking with France to strengthen our border security and the next steps on our reforms to the asylum system. The House will be aware that when we came into the government, we found an asylum and immigration system in chaos. Small boat gangs for 7 years had been allowed to embed their criminal trade along the French coast. The asylum backlog was soaring and illegal working was being ignored. The previous government had lost control of the system and, as a result, opened many hundreds of asylum hotels across the country, while returns were a third lower than in 2010. And before leaving office, they deliberately cut asylum decision-making by 70%, leaving a steeply rising backlog behind. It is little wonder that people right across the country lost confidence in the system and demanded to know why they were paying the price of a system that was so out of control. But that does not mean that people rejected the long and proud history of Britain doing our bit to help those fleeing persecution or conflict, including in the past decade families from Ukraine, Syria and Hong Kong. Because it is the British way to do our bit alongside other countries to help those who need sanctuary. But the system has to be controlled and managed, based on fair and properly enforced rules, not chaos and exploitation driven by criminal smuggler gangs. And it is exactly because of our important tradition that substantial reforms are needed now. In our first year in government, we've taken immediate action, laying the foundations for more fundamental reform. We have restored asylum decision-making and then rapidly increased the rate of decisions. Had we continued with the previous government's freeze on asylum decisions, thousands more people would have been in hotels and asylum accommodation by now. Instead, we removed 35,000 people with no right to be here, including a 28% increase in returns of failed asylum seekers and a 14% increase in removals of foreign criminals. We've increased raids and arrests on illegal working by 50%, and we cut the annual hotel bill by almost £1 billion in the last financial year. We are rolling out digital ID and biometric kits so immigration enforcement can check on the spot whether someone has a right to work or a right to be in the UK. And on channel crossings and organised immigration crime, we are putting in place new powers, new structures and new international agreements to help dismantle the criminal industry behind the boats. So I want to update the House on the further steps we're now taking. In August, I signed the new treaty with France, allowing us for the first time to directly return those who arrive on small boats. The first detentions took place the next day of people immediately on arrival in Dover, and we expect the first returns to begin later this month. Applications have also been opened for the reciprocal legal route, with the first cases under consideration, subject to strict security checks. We've made clear this is a pilot scheme, but the more we prove the concept at the outset, the better we will be able to develop and grow it.
But the principles it embodies are crucial, because no one should be making these dangerous or illegal journeys on small boats, and if they do, we want to see them swiftly returned. But in return, we believe in doing our bit alongside other countries to help those who have fled persecution through managed and controlled legal programmes. This summer, we've also taken further action to strengthen enforcement against smuggling gangs. France has reviewed its maritime approach to allow for the interception of taxi boats in French waters, and we will continue to work with them to implement this change as soon as possible. In the last year, the National Crime Agency has led 347 disruptions of immigration crime networks, their highest level on record, and a 40% increase in a year. Over the summer, we announced a £100 million uplift in funding for border security and up to 300 more personnel in the National Crime Agency focusing on targeting the smuggler gangs. And the border security bill will give them stronger powers, counter-terrorism powers against smuggler gangs, powers to seize and download mobile phones of small boat arrivals, and the power to ban sex offenders from the asylum system altogether. Mr. Speaker, if opposition parties work with us to speed passage through the other place instead of opposing the bill, those powers could be in place within months, making our country safer and more secure. Let me turn now to the major reforms that are needed to fix the broken asylum system that we inherited. Although we have increased decision-making and increased returns, the overall system remains sclerotic, outdated and unfair. So as we committed in the Immigration White Paper, we will shortly set out more radical reforms to modernise the asylum system and to boost our border security, tackling the pull factors, strengthening enforcement, making sure people are treated fairly, reforming the way that the ECHR is interpreted here at home, speeding up the system, cutting numbers and ending the use of hotels, and developing controlled and managed routes for genuine refugees. At the heart of these reforms will be a complete overhaul of the appeals system, the biggest obstacle to reducing the size of the asylum system and to ending hotel use. Because tens of thousands of people in asylum accommodation are currently waiting for appeals, and under the current system that figure is to grow, with an average wait time already of 54 weeks. So we have already funded thousands of additional sitting days this year, and the Border Security Bill will introduce a statutory timeframe of 24 weeks, but we need to go further. So we will introduce a new independent body to deal with immigration and asylum appeals, fully independent of government, staffed by professionally trained adjudicators with safeguards to ensure high standards, but able to surge capacity as needed to accelerate and prioritise cases, alongside new procedures to tackle repeat applications and unnecessary delays. We're also increasing detention and returns capacity, including a 1,000-bed expansion at Campsfield and Haslar, with the first tranche of additional beds coming online within months to support many thousands more in forced removals each year. And our reforms will also address the overly complex system for family migration, including changes to the way that Article 8 of the ECHR is interpreted. We should be clear, international law is important. It is because other countries know that we abide by it that we have been able to make these new agreements with France to return people who arrive on small boats, to make new agreements with Germany to stop the warehousing of small boats by criminal gangs, and to explore returns hubs partnerships with other European countries. But we also need the interpretation of international law to keep up with the realities and challenges of today's world. But there is one area where we also need to make more immediate challenges. The current rules for family reunion for refugees were designed many years ago to help families separated by war, conflict and persecution. But the way they are now being used has changed. Even just before the pandemic, refugees who applied to bring family to the UK did so on average more than 1 or 2 years after they had been granted protection, long enough for them to be able to get jobs or find housing or be able to provide their family with some support. In Denmark and Switzerland, currently those granted humanitarian protection are not able to apply to bring family for at least 2 years after protection has been granted. But here in the UK now, however, those applications come in on average in around a month after protection has been granted, often even before a newly granted refugee has left asylum accommodation. As a consequence, refugee families who arrive are far more likely to be seeking homelessness assistance. And some councils are finding that more than a quarter of their family homelessness applications are linked to refugee family reunion. That is not sustainable. Currently, there are also no conditions on family reunion for refugee sponsors, unlike those in place if the sponsor is a British citizen or a long-term UK resident, and that is not fair. Finally, the proportion of migrants who have arrived on small boats and who then apply to bring family has also increased sharply in recent years, with signs that smuggler gangs are now able to use the promise of family reunion to promote dangerous journeys to the UK. Mr. Speaker, we continue to believe that families staying together is important, and it's why we will seek to prioritise family groups among the applicants to come to Britain under our new deal with France. But reforms are needed. So in our asylum policy statement later this year, we will set out a new system for family migration, including looking at contribution requirements, longer periods before newly granted refugees can apply, and dedicated controlled arrangements for unaccompanied children and for those fleeing persecution who have family in the UK. And we aim to have some of those changes in place for the spring. But in the meantime, we do need to address the immediate pressures on local authorities and the risks from criminal gangs using family reunion as a pull factor to encourage more people onto dangerous boats. Therefore, we are bringing forward new immigration rules this week to temporarily suspend new applications under the existing dedicated refugee family reunion route. Until the new framework is introduced, refugees will be covered by the same family migration rules and conditions as everyone else. Mr. Speaker, let me turn next to the action we're taking to ensure that every asylum hotel will be closed for good under this government. Not just by shifting individuals from hotels to other sites, but by driving down the numbers in supported accommodation overall. And not in a chaotic way through piecemeal court judgments, but through a controlled, managed and orderly programme. Driving down inflow into the asylum system, clearing the appeals backlog, which is crucial, and continuing to increase returns. Within the asylum estate, we are reconfiguring sites, increasing room sharing, tightening the test for accommodation and working at pace to identify alternative, cheaper and more appropriate accommodation with other government departments and with local authorities. And we're increasing standards and security and joint public safety cooperation between the police, accommodation providers and the Home Office to ensure that laws and rules are enforced. Mr. Speaker, I understand and agree with local councils and communities who want the asylum hotels in their communities closed, because we need to close all asylum hotels and we need to do so for good. But that must be done in a controlled and orderly manner and not through a return to the previous government's chaos that led to the opening of hotels in the first place. Finally, Mr. Speaker, let me update the House on the continued legal and controlled support that we will provide for those facing conflict and persecution. We will continue to do our bit to support Ukraine, extending the Ukraine Permission Extension Scheme by a further 24 months, with further details to be set out in due course. We're also taking immediate action to rescue children who have been seriously injured in the horrendous onslaught on civilians in Gaza so they can get the health treatment they need. And the Foreign Secretary will update the House shortly on the progress to get those children out. I can confirm that the Home Office has put in place systems to issue expedited visas with biometric checks conducted prior to arrival for children and their immediate accompanying family members. And we have done the same for all the Chevening scholars and are in the process of doing so now for the next group of students from Gaza who have been awarded fully funded scholarships and places at UK universities so they can start their studies in autumn this year. And later this year, we will set out plans to establish a permanent framework for refugee students to come study in the UK so we can help more talented young people fleeing war and persecution to find a better future, alongside capped and managed ways for refugees to work here in the UK. Mr. Speaker, this government is determined to fix every aspect of the broken system we inherited and to restore the confidence of the British people. Solving problems, not exploiting them. A serious and comprehensive plan, not fantasy claims based on sums that don't add up or gimmicks that failed in the past. What we will never do is seek to stir up chaos, division or hate, because that is not who we are as a country, and that is not what Britain stands for. A practical plan to strengthen our border security, to fix the asylum chaos and to rebuild confidence in an asylum and immigration system that serves our national interest, protects our national security and reflects our national values. Because when we wave the Union flag, when we wave the St George's flag, when we sing God Save the King and celebrate everything that is great about Britain and about our country, we do so with pride because of the values that our flags, our king and our country represent. Togetherness, fairness and decency, respect for each other, respect for the rule of law. That is what our country stands for. That is the British way to fix the problems we face, and I commend this statement to the House.